My parents announced at their wedding anniversary that I was no longer part of the family. My dad said he has always been a disgrace to us. He chose to be a common plumber instead of a lawyer. Such a poor boy. I did not make a scene. I just calmly left, but I was surely going to make them regret. Hello. Thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Anthony Lewis from South Dakota. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into today's story. I knew something was wrong the moment the champagne flute stopped clinking. The room didn't go quiet all at once. It slowed like a train easing into the station. First the laughter dimmed, then the conversations trailed off mid-sentence. My mother stood near the piano in her sequin navy gown, nodding at my father as he tapped his glass with the back of a fork. He smiled wide, that politician's smile he reserved for depositions and galas. My younger brother, Evan, hovered behind them, his eyes flicking toward me like he already knew what was coming. My father raised his glass and said, "Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. 40 years of marriage built on loyalty, faith, and above all, standards." I felt the heat rise in my chest before the shame. My fiancé, ex now, had squeezed my hand under the table just moments earlier. We'd driven up from the south side to this rented ballroom in Lincoln Park. Everyone here smelled like money and wore it like skin. I had grease under my fingernails. I'd showered twice before coming. I still didn't feel clean. Family has always been important to us, he went on. But sometimes, there's a branch that rots early, and it must be cut off. There was no confusion. People didn't gasp. They understood. The moment felt rehearsed, like a scene from a courtroom drama he'd directed in his mind. Someone near the front turned to look at me. Then someone else. He didn't even glance in my direction when he said it. He's chosen to live beneath us, to work with his hands like a laborer instead of using the mind God gave him. Plumbing. Of all things. It's disgraceful. I looked down at my palms. They were rough, calloused, cracked along the thumb from the last apartment job I took. That was the week I hired my third employee. We'd hit 6 figures in profit that month. I hadn't told anyone. I was waiting for the right time. Maybe tonight, stupidly, I thought. My father lifted his glass higher, his voice swelling now. We've decided, for the sake of our family's legacy and dignity, that he is no longer one of us. As of tonight, we consider him estranged. The clink of the toast followed. Deliberate. Cold. I stood up without thinking. The chair's legs scraped against the polished floor, but nobody flinched. Not even my mother. She looked down at the pearls on her neck, twisting them as if to count her sins. Or maybe mine. I didn't say a word. No scene. No shouting. That would have satisfied him too much, confirmed his story that I was beneath him, unstable, a disgrace. So I gave him silence. The most surgical kind. As I walked out, past tables full of stiff-necked lawyers and their champagne wives, past Evan who couldn't even meet my eyes, I remembered the last time my father ever hugged me. I was 15, and I'd just won a regional debate tournament. He held me for 3 seconds and said, "That's the boy I raised. That boy died long ago. He just didn't know it yet." I got into my van, the same one I used to haul copper pipe and busted toilets, and drove off while the echoes of laughter, polite, complicit, faded behind me. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went home, opened my laptop, and reviewed the quarterly performance of a client most people didn't know I held shares in, Sterling and Rowe Construction, my father's firm's biggest account. 20%. Silent, strategic, airtight. They had no idea I was there. But soon, they would. I didn't answer the next morning's calls, or the texts, or the voicemail from my aunt, breathy and awkward, saying maybe my father didn't mean what he said, that it was a bad joke, said in the heat of the moment. But there was no heat in his voice that night, only calculation, the kind of tone a man uses when he's already rewritten the ending. I deleted the message and went back to tightening a rusted pipe under Mrs. Collier's sink on 71st Street. I started showing up earlier, leaving later. I replaced caffeine with resentment. It had longer-lasting energy anyway. I scrubbed invoices myself, designed logos on a free trial of Photoshop, taught myself QuickBooks at night, while my fingernails were still lined with soldering grime. The company was small then. Just me, Devin, and Enrique. 3 vans. A handful of jobs a week. But it was mine. And every dollar we made was a brick in the wall I was building between who I was and who I'd been told to be. I stopped attending family holidays. Deleted group chats. Blocked my mother after she sent one too many articles about night schools offering law degrees for older learners. She never apologized. Just redirected. Like she thought my real life was a stubborn detour. Then one day, Devin came into the garage holding a printed email from a potential investor. A private equity guy, clean-cut, predatory smile type, who wanted to talk franchising. I listened, nodded, and politely declined. We weren't ready, not yet. But the attention meant people were noticing. We'd cleared $250,000 that quarter. The numbers didn't feel real until I printed them out and laid them next to the birthday card my parents never sent. I remembered Sterling and Rowe, one of the city's biggest commercial builders. My father talked about them for years, back when he still believed I might shadow him into the firm. At 20, I was already sneaking glances at their balance sheets. By 30, I bought my first stake quietly, through an angel fund that owed me a favor. 20% wasn't controlling, but it was close enough to whisper into the boardroom and be heard. I made myself invisible in all the ways that mattered. No Instagram, no LinkedIn, no press. I wanted the kind of success that didn't knock on doors, it owned the building. Meanwhile, my father's firm started slipping, not catastrophically, just quietly. One major client delayed their renewal. A city contract went elsewhere. Nothing dramatic, nothing traceable, but I felt it, like watching the temperature drop by 1 degree a day. Not enough to notice. Until the pipes burst. And all the while, we were growing. Not like tech companies grow, flashy, inflated, fake. Ours was rooted, dirty, real. We earned trust in boiler rooms and basements, sweat in places no lawyer would ever set foot. Our name started to circulate in neighborhoods that never cared about brands before. People recommended us in church basements and hardware store bulletin boards. Word spread because our work held. I rented an office downtown. Glass, steel, sharp corners. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to. I kept the first wrench I'd ever bought on a shelf behind my desk, next to the plaque of our first city contract. It wasn't decorative. It was proof. Then came the dinner invitation. From Evan. He was in town for a few days. Wanted to catch up. I declined. He texted again, said Dad was asking about me. I replied with a photo our company's fleet lined up outside a city job site. No caption. I didn't need to explain. He knew what I was building. Every night before bed, I opened a spreadsheet labeled S&R Exit Strategy. I reviewed market trends, board member bios, litigation risk. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was liberation through precision. I wasn't burning bridges. I was buying the land they stood on. People think the loud ones win. But silence is the most dangerous sound in the world. It means you're listening, you're learning, and eventually, you're going to act. They thought I vanished. I didn't vanish. I just went underground, where the pipes run, where the real power is. The first time I saw my father's name on a meeting docket, I didn't flinch. Not even a blink. Just circled it in red and kept reading. It was a mid-level quarterly update from Sterling and Rowe's advisory board. The kind of meeting no one really pays attention to unless something's going wrong. But I had been tracking the company long enough to know this one mattered. Buried deep in the agenda was a legal services review. Contract renewal up for discussion. I smiled at the irony. I showed up in a navy suit that didn't quite hide the calluses on my hands. They were permanent now. My handshake was still too firm, too real, for these types of rooms. They respected that. Said I was grounded. Practical. I never corrected them. I wanted them to think I was just a guy who got lucky with some plumbing contracts. No one suspected the depth of my planning or how personal it was. The firm my father ran had handled Sterling and Rowe's legal work for nearly 20 years. Old money handshake deals. Country club loyalty. But loyalty, I'd learned, had an expiration date. Especially when it started costing more than it protected. And lately, the firm had become sloppy. 2 settlements that should have gone to arbitration. 1 conflict of interest they failed to disclose. I knew because I fed the information to the board through another investor. It was slow, careful erosion. Not a collapse, just a quiet undermining of faith. During the meeting, when the conversation shifted to the firm's performance, I spoke up. Not first, not loud. Just deliberately. I think it's worth reviewing alternative counsel, I said, tapping the notes in front of me. There's been leakage. Our reputation can't afford unnecessary liability. No one disagreed. That's the thing about corporate politics. When the blood's in the water, no one wants to be the first to speak, but everyone wants to be the second. The board voted unanimously to initiate a review. That's all it took. Just a seed of doubt. That was the beginning of the end. Outside the building, I lit a cigarette even though I don't smoke. Just held it. Let it burn down on my fingers. I liked the smell, acrid and alive. It reminded me I could still feel things, even if most of them were buried beneath the layers I'd built to survive. Back at the office, Devin was reviewing a new fleet deal. 5 trucks, all branded with our new logo. He asked if we should expand into commercial contracts. I said yes without looking up. Growth wasn't a goal anymore. It was a necessity. I needed to be too big to ignore, too rooted to erase. If my father had chosen legacy over blood, I'd show him what legacy really looked like. I stopped thinking about reconciliation. There was a time when I wanted him to call, to say he'd been wrong, that he missed me. That time had expired. What I wanted now was clarity. Clean lines. Cause and effect. He cut me off to protect his name. I became the kind of name that made his obsolete. One night, I returned to the neighborhood I grew up in. Parked the van, still dented from the early days, in front of our old house. The lights were on. The curtains drawn. I watched for 10 minutes. Just long enough to wonder if he still kept my high school debate trophies in the attic or if they'd gone out with the trash. I didn't knock. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to make sure I didn't feel anything. I didn't. But I did feel something strange when I passed by Evan's car a few blocks down. He hadn't noticed me. He was outside a bar, laughing, carefree. It hit me then. He never paid the price. He never had to. He got to stay in the family, inherit the firm, bask in the illusion of love. While I built my kingdom out of sweat and silence. I wasn't bitter. I was calculating. So I sent him a gift anonymously. Just a copy of our company's most recent financials, neatly bound, with a post-it on the front. Imagine what I'll do next. The silence that followed was exactly what I wanted. Not confrontation. Awareness. This wasn't a comeback. It was an evolution. They didn't exile me. They set me free. And freedom, I'd learned, was the most dangerous thing a person like me could have. The first time I saw my name in the paper, it wasn't for revenge, it was for water. The Plumber King, the headline read, under a photo of me standing with city officials beside the newly renovated municipal water station. It was a small profile piece, buried under real estate noise and election gossip, but it hit hard in the circles that mattered. Contractors, engineers, bureaucrats with budgets and leaky infrastructure, the ones who decide what gets built and who gets paid. I didn't ask for the nickname, but I didn't mind it either. The article ran alongside our first citywide campaign. Billboards with bold red font. Slogans like trust built underground and clean hands. Dirty work. Our logo, sleek, minimalist, unmistakable, was on buses, rooftops, plumbers' supply shops. Devin had suggested a radio ad. I greenlit a full podcast series. Not because it was necessary, but because I wanted to take up space. I wanted them to hear my name in traffic. My mother sent a short email. I saw the ad. Congratulations. I hope you're well. No apology. No acknowledgement of the night they cut me out like a tumor. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to our head of marketing with the note. This ad campaign's working. A few days later, Evan texted. We should catch up. You've done well. I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't cruelty I felt. Just detachment. Like looking at a photo from a life that no longer belonged to me. I left him on read. Meanwhile, the firm was bleeding. Sterling and Rowe had officially terminated their contract with my father's office. And though the public reason was strategic restructuring, I knew better. The real reason had my signature in the footnotes of the board's decision memo. The loss wasn't just financial, it was reputational. Whispers started in courthouse hallways. Clients got nervous. Old alliances began to rot under pressure. Still, I didn't speak his name. Not in interviews. Not in meetings. Not even to the team who knew the story. I didn't need to. My success was the statement. Every headline, every deal closed, every new employee on board was another page in a biography he'd never wanted me to write. Then came the gala. It was a city fundraiser for vocational training, iron workers, electricians, HVAC, plumbers. We'd donated heavily, quietly. Someone from the mayor's office reached out and asked if I'd attend, maybe even speak. I said yes, on one condition. My table would include 3 of our longest-standing field workers, 2 apprentices, and one of our early clients, Mr. Glasser, who let us fix a 6-unit apartment building pro bono after a winter freeze burst every pipe. The ballroom was grand, chandeliers and string quartets and flutes filled with expensive nothing. I showed up in a gray tailored suit, still wearing the work boots I'd built the company in. Let them see it. Let them feel the difference. They announced me as one of the city's fastest-growing infrastructure companies. Applause followed. I spoke briefly. No notes. Just clarity. When you're raised to believe that only certain kinds of work are respectable, you forget who actually keeps the world running. We don't just fix leaks. We keep hospitals open, schools warm, homes safe. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm proud of it. And I hope every kid who gets handed a wrench instead of a textbook knows you can build an empire with it. More applause. More handshakes. And then, from across the room, I saw him. My father. I don't know if he knew I'd be there. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. The tux didn't fit like it used to. Evan was next to him, tight-jawed. My father didn't move toward me. Just stared. Long and hard. Not angry. Not ashamed. Just hollow. I nodded once. Not a greeting. A confirmation. Yes, it's me. He turned away first. I finished my drink. Took a photo with Devin and the apprentices. Laughed at something stupid someone said about pipes and politics. And I felt nothing. No triumph. No rage. Just peace. A strange, surgical peace. He had disowned me publicly. And now, publicly, I had made him irrelevant. Not with a fight. With presence. The first few calls came from numbers I didn't recognize. No voicemails. No texts. Just missed calls from the same area code I grew up in. I ignored them. Spam, I assumed. Or maybe not. I'd been on the radio recently, telling a story about the first sink I ever fixed for money. Maybe the wrong people were listening now. On the 6th attempt, curiosity got the better of me. I answered without speaking. There was a pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. Hey, it's Evan. My body didn't react, but my breath did. Shallow, automatic. I said nothing. He filled the silence. I know it's been a while. I wouldn't be calling unless it was serious. Still, I didn't answer. I let the hum of my office fill the space between us. In the glass reflection, I could see the skyline. My skyline now. It's Dad, he said finally. He's really sick. Heart failure. Complications from the surgery. It's not good. He waited like he expected something. Shock. Maybe. Grief. Forgiveness. I gave him none. He keeps asking for you, Evan said. He's in and out of lucidity, but when he's clear, he asks if you've called. If you've come. I let that sink in. Not because it hurt, but because I wanted to feel whether it should. He says he was wrong. Evan added quietly. That he went too far. That night. Which night? I interrupted, finally. Evan hesitated. The anniversary. The speech. Was it a speech? I said, because I remember it more like an execution. He sighed. He's dying, man. I stood up and walked to the window, phone still to my ear. You know what's funny, Evan? I said. When you say that, all I feel is distance. Like you're talking about someone else's father. Not mine. Don't do this. He already did, I said, voice level. In front of 100 people. Remember? He has always been a disgrace to us. You didn't stop him. You stood behind him like the good son. There was a long pause on the line. I was scared, he said. You don't know what it was like. I do, I cut in. I know exactly what it was like. Because I lived it. And I built a life in the silence he left behind. I became something real while he buried himself in pride. He regrets it. Too late. You were his firstborn. No, I said. I was his warning. Evan went quiet. Then, softly, you're really not going to come? I exhaled, slow and steady. Who is Dad? The line didn't disconnect right away. I think he waited, hoping I'd laugh, say I was kidding. But the silence was solid. Final. Eventually, he hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I felt guilt. I felt tempted. Tempted to show up. To let him see what he lost. To watch the apology crawl out of his throat like a confession. But I knew better. That kind of closure was a fantasy. Men like him didn't apologize. They unraveled. The next morning, Devin told me a new contract had cleared. Citywide infrastructure overhaul. Multi-year. Multi-million. We were already past the point of arrival. We were defining the standard now. I told him to schedule a press briefing. And when the reporter asked about the family that disowned me, I didn't dodge. They made their choice, I said, looking straight into the lens. And so did I. Later that week, Evan sent a photo of our father in the hospital bed. Oxygen tube. Dull eyes. Yellowing skin. I deleted it. Not because it hurt. Because it didn't. The article landed on a Thursday. Prominent law firm loses longtime clients amid ethical review. It didn't name my father directly, but it didn't have to. Everyone in the city knew who founded McAllister and Hartwell. His name was carved into the marble at their downtown office, just beneath the scales of justice, now chipped, ironically, from a pipe burst last winter. I remember because we bid on that repair job anonymously. We didn't get it. I'd made sure of that. Some acts of revenge aren't worth the proximity. The expose didn't lie. 3 client departures. 2 ongoing malpractice suits. One anonymous source, not me, though I smiled at the accuracy, said the firm had lost its edge. Another said they confused pedigree with relevance. It was the exact phrase my father once used about me. I read the article twice, then closed the tab. I didn't need to reread my victory. The calls started again. Evan, an aunt I hadn't heard from since the exile. Even an old family friend who used to call me kiddo while pouring too much scotch into my father's glass. All of them wanted the same thing. My presence. My forgiveness. My help. The company I'd built had power now, real, legal power. Influence. If I stepped in, I could probably stop the bleeding. Maybe even salvage the name. I didn't reply. They hadn't called when I was invisible. They hadn't checked in when I was in basement shoulder deep in sewage. They wanted my reputation now that theirs had begun to rot. The firm wasn't the only thing crumbling. I heard from someone, an old paralegal who quietly switched to our in-house counsel, that my father rarely showed up anymore. Rumors swirled about hospital visits, about medication, about outbursts during partner meetings. Some said he tried to restructure the board. Others said he hadn't spoken a full sentence in weeks. But the worst part? They didn't sound angry at him. They sounded embarrassed by him, like a once proud monument now fenced off for decay. That's what they really feared, not failure, but irrelevance. I saw Evan again, unexpectedly. A city infrastructure conference. He approached me between panels, older and smaller than I remembered. His tie was loose, and he looked like he hadn't slept well in months. I read the article, he said. You got what you wanted. I looked at him carefully. I didn't want this, I said. He blinked. What do you mean? I wanted dignity. For myself. The fact that your firm couldn't survive without crushing someone doesn't make me happy. It makes me certain I was right to leave. He didn't respond right away. He's not the same, he said eventually. Dad. He talks to himself sometimes. Doesn't recognize people. It's getting bad. I nodded once. That's what happens when you build a kingdom out of fear. Eventually, you end up alone in it. You could help him, he said, voice quieter now. You could at least say goodbye. I met his eyes and said something I hadn't even rehearsed. I did. The night he raised that glass. That ended the conversation. Back at the office, Devin showed me our latest hiring numbers, 60 new technicians in 3 months. We launched a training program for young men and women with no college degrees, many of whom had never been treated as capable before. We were giving them tools, yes, but also belief. Sometimes I watched them through the warehouse windows. The way they laughed, the way they helped each other carry pipe, the way they treated work like pride instead of punishment. This was my legacy. I didn't need marble walls or boardroom handshakes. I had built something beneath the surface, something unshakable. And while the law firm tried to plug its leaks, while my father disappeared into whatever fog swallowed men like him in the end, I kept building. Not out of hate. Out of clarity. I wasn't his son anymore. I was something far rarer. I was self-made. The hospital didn't smell like death. It smelled like bleach and cafeteria soup. Thick, metallic air designed to cover decay. I wasn't there for closure. I'd already taken that. I came because a part of me wanted to look into his eyes and confirm what I suspected, that he was gone long before the machines ever told the truth. The nurse at the front desk didn't recognize me. I didn't use my last name. Just pointed to the room number Evan had reluctantly texted me 3 nights ago. He's asking again. Won't stop. Just come, say something. Please. I hadn't replied, but I'd screenshotted it. Room 614. West Wing. Cardiac. The hallway was long and fluorescent, each step a quiet echo over linoleum. I passed other families, some crying, some asleep in plastic chairs, all of them still believing that something good could come from this place. I didn't believe that. I believed in endings. The door was cracked open. I pushed it gently and stepped inside. He looked smaller than I remembered. The giant who once towered in courtrooms, whose voice could silence a room and gut a grown man in 6 syllables, now lay beneath thin cotton sheets within 4, digging into his arm like an apology. His mouth moved, barely. His eyes fluttered. I didn't speak. I pulled the chair out from the corner, quietly, and sat down. He noticed the motion, turned toward me. For a moment, he didn't recognize me. His eyes tried to focus, tried to place me, and then, suddenly, he did. His lips moved again. A word. Maybe my name. Maybe not. It didn't matter. He coughed once, then whispered, "You came." I nodded. Not for him. For myself. He reached out with a trembling hand. I didn't take it. Everything fell apart, he said. His voice was cracked porcelain, dry and barely shaped into words. The firm. The people. They left. Everyone left. I said nothing. He licked his lips and blinked slowly. I didn't think you'd make it, he added, almost like a confession. You were just a boy with tools. And you were just a man with pride, I said. His eyes winced like the words hit bone. I wanted to feel something. A flicker. Pity, maybe. But all I felt was release. Like someone had finally opened a window in a sealed room. You hurt me, I said calmly. You cut me off to protect your image. You wanted a son who mirrored your ego. And when I didn't, you chose to erase me. He shook his head slightly. I didn't mean, you meant every word, I interrupted. That's why it worked. That's why it stuck. Because it wasn't a mistake. It was your truth. Silence sat between us like another machine. He looked past me, toward the ceiling. I was wrong. I waited. I see it now, he whispered. What you built. Who you became. My voice was flat. You don't know who I became. You only know what made the papers. He coughed again. Shallow. Weak. Then turned back to me. I wanted to protect our name. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said it clearly. You had a son. You chose a name instead. And now you have neither. His breathing deepened. Slower now. Like each breath was a choice he had to make. He whispered something again. I leaned in. Forgive me, he said. I sat back. And then, without malice, without victory, I spoke the last words I would ever say to him. I forgive you. But I don't need you anymore. His eyes welled just slightly. I saw it. Then something behind them slipped loose. A softness. Maybe sorrow. Maybe surrender. I stood up. Before I left, I placed something on the table beside his bed. It wasn't a flower. It wasn't a family photo. It was the first invoice my plumbing company ever issued. Creased. Smudged. Still bearing the ink of a $90 bathtub repair. He never looked at it. I walked out of the hospital with nothing in my hands. And for the first time in my life, I felt clean. Not light. Not joyful. Just finished. The house I bought sat on the edge of the river, far enough from the city that I didn't hear sirens anymore. Just the wind pushing water against the dock. It was an old place, all creaky floors and stubborn door frames, the kind of house that felt honest. I kept the original brick and painted the porch charcoal gray. Inside, it was quiet. No awards. No reminders. Just books, tools, coffee mugs with chipped handles, and a kettle that whistled like it meant it. I didn't check the obituaries the week after the hospital. I didn't need to. When my father died, no one told me directly. I just noticed that the missed calls stopped. That was how I knew. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't send flowers. I sent a donation to a trade school under his name, not because he deserved it, because someone needed to benefit from the man he failed to be. The city kept calling. New contracts, new opportunities. My company, now the largest independent plumbing firm in the region, was expanding into stormwater systems, even early-stage sustainability initiatives. We hired 200 new technicians that year, people who had once been overlooked, underpaid, told they were too slow, too quiet, too broken. I knew those lies well. I used to believe them. Some days I still worked the tools, not because I had to, because I liked the weight in my hands. Copper pipe doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend. It either fits or it leaks. You can trust something that honest. I got used to the solitude. Evan called once more, a month after the burial. I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. He didn't waste time. Mom's moving out of the old house. Said she doesn't want to live in the past. I smiled faintly, looking out at the river. Took her long enough. She asked about you. She had her chance, I said. I gave silence. She responded with more of it. We're even. He was quiet. Then, you really built all this, huh? Brick by brick. I never hated you, he said. I know, I replied. You just stood still. And that was the difference. We hung up without goodbye. It felt appropriate. By spring, I opened a small trade school on the south side. Named it after my first apprentice, Deshawn, who'd been shot 2 years earlier walking home from a job site. The sign above the door was simple. The work is the worth. No family crest. No Latin motto. Just truth. One afternoon, a young man asked if I'd ever been to college. I said no. He looked surprised, then asked, So how'd you end up here? I paused. Then I said, Someone told me I wasn't worth much. I decided to prove them wrong. He nodded like he understood, like he'd heard it too. And just like that, the wound was gone. Not erased. Just healed. Scarred over, sure, but stronger where it had once split open. When people ask me now about my father, I don't lie. I just say, we didn't see the world the same way. It's the cleanest truth I can offer. And when they ask how I built what I did, I tell them this, not with forgiveness, not with fury, but with freedom. If this story hits something deep, if you've ever been dismissed, disrespected, or disowned for not fitting their version of success, then do one thing right now. Like this video, drop a comment with the moment that shook you most. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that cut deep, hit hard, and stay with you long after they're over. See you soon in our next story.